Hello and welcome back. We've got the 1885 Uberti High Wall here again, and this time I've gone ahead and pulled off the 6-power long scope. I've got quite a few other scopes that I want to put on here and test out, so I think it's time to swap this one out. I figure in the meanwhile, I might as well go over exactly how it is that this is mounted up and how you might get it on a rifle of your own. To start off with, this scope is built for rifles that have a barrel length of between 26 and 34 inches. If you have a barrel that's of a different length, you can swap out the sunshade here on the end. Sorry, there's a lot of threading. And we have a number of different lengths that can make up the length difference in your barrel. 3, 5, 7, and 9 inches. And that little sunshade fits into the ring that goes here on the front end. So these are pretty easy to swap out. If you end up getting a different size or a wrong size or something, it's probably one of the easiest things to fix up. For my particular rifle with the 32-inch barrel, and that's measured back here from the face of the breech to the end of the muzzle, I'm going to go ahead and use this 7-inch. So if you had a barrel that's about 34 inches, you'd use the 9-inch. If you'd have one that's 30 inches, you use the 5-inch, and 26 to 28, you go ahead and use the 3-inch. One thing to keep in mind, it may look a little funky to have the end of your scope not match up with the end of your barrel. Whatever you do, it's just best not to have the end stick out past the muzzle. There's going to be a lot of force and a lot of shock wave that's kicking out right there, and you just don't want that bumping up against the end of your scope. So let's go ahead, start here with the heavy-duty base. This is meant to take a lot more of the recoil and distribute it back here on the rear mount, or at least on the base of it. The hole spacing, if you want to check, your rifle may have holes already drilled. Some do, like Pedersoli 1874 Sharps. We've come across those that have been drilled to fit this. Our particular one, the 85 High Wall, had the rear dovetail and the front dovetail, but did not have these two holes, so we did have to get those drilled. It's actually a pretty quick process, all things considered. So, let's see here. This hole to the second hole, center to center, is 23.7 millimeters. The second hole to the third hole, center to center, is about 10 millimeters. Center of the front hole to the center of the dovetail block is 42.5 millimeters. This right here is the dovetail. Different rifles may have different sizes. The most common is going to be the 3/8 inch. We've come across plenty that are 1/2 inch or about 1/2 inch. We've seen some that are 5/8, but that's a little more rare. 3/8 generally is going to cover most rifle models. We're going to start by sliding this dovetail in the slot. I'm just going to tighten it down finger tight. This is going to line up here with the heavy-duty base. The rear portion of the heavy-duty base has 3 screw holes. The center one actually just allows the head of the dovetail block's center screw to come through. The other 2 line up with screws that go into the dovetail. Go ahead and drop those in. These also, I'm just going to go ahead and do finger tight for right now. I want to make sure everything's lined up before I go ahead and tighten it down. The 2 holes that we had drilled, we went ahead and got drilled to a size of 840, and ours go about 1/8 inch into the barrel. We found that was plenty fine holding up under 45-70 fire. Although, let me go ahead and get this in. Now I've got those, I'll go ahead and tighten everything up. So this, actually, let me go ahead and pull this a little closer. The dovetail, the center screw of the dovetail pushes the dovetail block up against the blades that are cut into the barrel. Then these two back screws pull the heavy-duty base down against the dovetail and tighten it up further into that little dovetail cut. These two screws here help hold that whole heavy-duty base onto the barrel itself, keep it from sliding forward, backward, side to side, all that sort of stuff. This is designed to hold this base and the scope itself as securely as possible to your barrel. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is you get 2 holes drilled if you don't already have them. If you're shooting 45-90 or something stronger, I'd actually go ahead and recommend getting this 3rd hole drilled as well, and probably an extra double thick shoulder pad for you. We've got that set up. Next up is the flat spring. Flat spring just fits onto this block here around the front, fits into that rectangular cut, and we're going to put it down there convex. So the curve is coming up at us, not the opposite direction. Sits on like so. On the bunny ears here, you'll see a similar rectangular cut. Back here, you'll notice a vernier scale. The vernier scale is going to be facing your eyes, and this cut is going to fit right here on top of this same cut. Until you get it tightened up, it does just kind of wobble there, so I recommend not just doing this on your lap if you can avoid it. Next up, we have here the windage plate with 2 screws. The screws fit down into that rectangular cut in the block on the front of the heavy-duty base. There's a notch on the front of it on one side, and that is used to line it up with the vernier scale here on the front for windage. Go ahead. So when this is all assembled, as you're moving it side to side, you'll see where that notch lines up with the scale down here, and that'll help you judge where to move it. Although these kind of scopes with the external adjustments are adjusted a little backwards from a regular internal adjustment scope, so it can get a little confusing. All of the screws that we've done up till now, these 2 holding the heavy-duty base into the dovetail block, the one through the center of the dovetail block, and then the 2 or 3, depending on your configuration, that go into the barrel. All those at this point you should probably go ahead and Loctite. The heavy-duty base isn't really designed to move, it's meant to stay as still as possible, so you can just go ahead and lock those down now. Whereas these windage adjustments, I'm not going to Loctite until I have the scope actually centered pretty well. For now, I'm just going to put these in, tighten it down a little bit to hold everything in place while I finish getting the scope assembled. These are locking and adjustment screws for your windage. They go into the holes on the side here. And again, don't Loctite these yet. Go ahead and work all your adjustments first and then go in later and drop a little bit in. On this mount, I really prefer using the fine elevation adjustment kit to give me a little more precision in the elevation adjustments. That has the cross bolt that goes through, here we go, the tube that locks onto the body of the scope. I'm not going to put this piece in yet, but I am going to go ahead and hook up everything else. This goes here on this side. I'll flip this over and verify that this is clear. You'll see 2 screw holes here on this side. Those line up where with this hook's on. So, I know unfortunately it is facing away from the camera, but I have to see the screws to put this thing in, so sorry. These screws as well go into a piece that is not designed to move, so I guess you could Loctite these two if you wanted to, but in all honesty, there's not really a need. There we go. This cross bolt here has a locking thumb nut that goes on the other side, so I'm just going to set this aside. All this right now has worked fine for an octagonal barrel. If you have a round barrel, we have here a round barrel offset kit. This will go onto your barrel in much the same way, and the mount itself will be installed just about a 1/4 inch to the left. Many of these rifles are going to have a dovetail cut on the front. If you have a round barrel that doesn't, this piece slips on your round barrel and gives you, there we go, a dovetail to hold the front ring. Ours is an octagonal rifle with a dovetail cut in the front. You could cut a dovetail in your rifle if you wanted to, or if not, again, this is a pretty easy solution. Front mount goes here in the front dovetail. And let me go ahead and just tighten these in. There are two main screws here on the front of the front ring that compress it into the dovetail. Actually spread it into the dovetail. The front mount is not the one that takes the majority of the force when the rifle is being fired. The rear mount is the one that's actually going to hold all the weight and the movement of the scope. That's the one where most of our actual mounting is done. Right now I'm using the higher front ring. That is going to allow me to zero at a closer range. It holds the scope a little more parallel to the body of the rifle. Depending on your caliber, your cartridge, your barrel, your load, really a bunch of different factors, you could potentially use a shorter front ring, the standard one that comes in the kit, and get zeroed close as well. I didn't want to chance it, so I went ahead and put the higher front ring in, but the lower front ring keeps the scope at a bit of an angle. And when it's down at an angle like this, just imagine you're going to have to lift the rifle up to put the center of the optic on the center of your target. That's going to have your barrel lobbing your shot. So if you have a slower load, the further out you go, the more you're going to have to angle it and the lower you're going to get. The closer you are, the more parallel you're going to have to be. And seeing as I was shooting this closer at the beginning and I was going to be zeroing pretty close, I went ahead and got that higher front ring. Sunshade slips in there. Ooh. And I've already adjusted the placement of these two blocks. This one holds the scope tube itself and holds it in the mount. You put your crossbolt through it, it handles all that. To prevent the scope from sliding up against this, we have a tube locking collar, and that we push up against the back of this mount. Right now I've got a little bit of a gap in between them just because I was lining this up earlier. Once I drop it in and make sure everything's positioned right, I'm going to lock down all these screws and go ahead and move this tube locking collar up against the back of the scope tube holder. So now I'll just go ahead and drop this in and put my cross bolt right on through. And it looks like I have to move this block just a little bit more. Loosen those up. If you have to replace these at any point, if for some reason they get damaged or you strip the screws, you just want to switch something out, you can remove the eyepiece and the eyepiece lock ring entirely, free up that tube and just slide those off, slide your new ones on. I don't want to deal with unthreading these right now, so I'm just not going to. get this put in. And there we are. Go ahead. You move up. You move down. We'll just lock you in place for now. And I'll go ahead and line this tube locking collar up against the back of the scope tube holding ring. This sort of fits like an R shape and presses just right up against the back. When you fire your rifle, the rifle wants to push back. The scope, which is sort of separate until momentum catches up with it, ends up pushing forward up against the mount. So you have to have this tube locking collar behind the mount to keep the scope from creeping forward. If you're firing a very heavy setup, if you're firing again that 45-90, the back and forth motion overall may end up jostling it backwards a little bit as well. In that case, you might want to put a second tube locking collar here if you notice that it's creeping. On 45-70, I've been getting away with just the one tube locking collar, so, I mean, hey, it works. Get that nice and tight. And that's about all there is to it. At this point, you put your caps on or go sight it in, or alternatively, you could check the level of your crosshairs, and if it turns out that they're a little canted to the side, just go ahead and loosen the screws up on that block, turn your scope until it's lined up, tighten it right back in. So that does it for the 6-power long scope. Next, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this all right back off, now that I've de-zeroed it, and mount the 6-power short scope, the prototype that we have in a two-tone color pattern, much like this longer scope. I've been looking to getting that one shot now that I have the proper 7¼ inch mounting for that short scope. If you have any other questions on the 6-power long scope, or if you want to talk about the easiest way to mount the scope to your rifle, we do have other kits that are purpose-built for specific rifle models. Again, probably the most common is any for a round barrel model. If you have any other questions, just go ahead and give us a call, drop us a comment, like, subscribe, really reach out any way you feel is applicable. I'll catch y'all next time at the range, and hope you have fun shooting.